at that Dr. Foote presentation.
Yeah,
Yes.
but he had actually written about it years before. That was his last visit, but there was an earlier visit, and he talked about NORCs. So a NORC is a naturally occurring retirement community, and how he explained that, and that's why, to me, that was such a revelation for me to think about this, is that here you had like the three of us coming up here as skiers in our 20s. We then come up only for day trips, and then we get older and we have a family and we come up for a weekend. We may stay at a hotel, then we rent a place, and we're now in our 40s, and we rent a place for the winter for 3 or 4 months only. Then they start to think about, the community starts to think about building broader resources recreationally, like golf courses, and biking begins to emerge. And what ultimately happens is that, unlike all the other retirement communities that you can think of in Canada and elsewhere, said David Foote, is that people who came in their 20s began renters, bought a weekend place, and then when there was a question where they wanted to live the rest of their life, there wasn't any question in their mind. They wanted to be in Collingwood. So all of a sudden we became a naturally occurring retirement community versus, say,
A promoted
Niagara,
one.
Yeah, well, Niagara on the Lake. That's the one I use as an example when I'm asked about this. Niagara on the Lake, none of us went to Stratford when we were 20 or 30 or 40. That was not part of our early life. So when we finally decided to semi-retire at 50 or 60, friends of mine, started thinking about Niagara on the Lake. But it wasn't a naturally occurring retirement community as the Collingwood region is. So the magic of this area, in my opinion, is the fact that it evolved, that tourists became weekenders, became renters, became permanent citizens, all in one smooth evolutionary move that now has, where now we are no longer a winter destination. We've got just over 50% of the visitors are here for summer activities versus winter. We're a year-round community. I like to joke with people that we haven't built a cottage here in 20 years because a cottage is a seasonal dwelling.
Yeah.
Well, we don't build cottages.
No,
they're all homes.
Yeah.
And if you've got a cottage, you've already turned it into a home. So we don't build cottages. And so everything has changed dramatically. And because of the immigration from the city and a high arts and culture awareness among city people who are so involved in all of the arts and culture of the big city, so many of the people up here, a good example is the Collingwood Cinema Club. The Collingwood Cinema Club shows the best films in the world. They come from all of the film festivals. I would say probably 80% of the 1,700 members of the Collingwood Cinema Club are immigrants from Toronto who used to go to TIFF, who would go to the Mount Pleasant Theatre because that's where the good films were.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And down to Bloor Street, and right? So we've created our own arts and culture up here from city folk moving up here, and that blended with already the Blue Mountain Foundation of the Arts, which has been going for over 40 years. All of a sudden it all sort of naturally came together over this last 10 or 15 years, and that's what we've been writing about in On the Bay, and I've really enjoyed becoming sort of an advocate for how we've grown naturally into a community.
I think another very valuable aspect of the Collingwood site is that it's an hour and a half.
Yes.
Well, it used to be an hour and a half.
Yeah.
It used to be an hour
Well, it's
and a
an
half.
hour to get out of Toronto,
Right.
so then it's an hour and a half.
It is, truly. Sorry, guys. It's time to go to break. We'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
It gets you out into the community and you meet so many new people and experience so many new opportunities and builds my self-esteem and my confidence level. What I've learned here as a new volunteer is different skills that I thought I would never even be interested in learning. I'm Chantal McCush, and I am a Rogers TV volunteer.
The law states a boater must carry up-to-date charts in the largest scale available for the body of water on which they are boating. Nautical marine charts are available for all charted waterways across Canada. Mobile navigation apps can also be a good navigation aid. If you are using an app or electronic charts, it's a good idea to carry paper charts as well. They are a good backup in case of a power failure.
Growing up, I just felt this hatred for myself, and I stopped planning for the future because I didn't think I had one. Without United Way and the generosity of the whole organization, I don't even really know where I'd be.
When I first moved to Collingwood in '82, it was an hour and a half I could be downtown Toronto, and that was a very positive reinforcement for me because I was from Toronto. I could see my friends, I could go to a hockey game, I could do all the things culturally that weren't available in the north area. But it was that, so even at an hour and a half, 2 hours, it seems to be when economic researchers do positioning, they do circles from the major urban centers.
Absolutely.
And there's a distance that people won't travel, or they will travel, but it's dramatically reduced. So I think the location was a great activity for us. Now, a lot of energies came from our people that moved in, and as you spoke about people in that natural transition, I probably know, I was just thinking, I know almost 30 or 40 people, that's exactly what they did. Mm-hmm. They started up here, they moved up a little bit older, they got a little bigger place, they got a bigger place, and then when it came to retirement, there was absolutely no discussion.
There was no question.
Yeah. For me, it took a little longer to understand how valuable Collingwood was. I was immersed in the operations, so I didn't see the trees sometimes for the forest or vice versa. It was a job opportunity to go back to Oshawa, and I was right in the final throes of here's the job, here's the position, here's the salary, and I actually sat in the chair and said, I can't do it. And it was because I knew my daughters loved living in Collingwood, I knew my wife lived in Collingwood, loved it, I loved living in Collingwood, so it was that recognition of what a wonderful place Collingwood is then and is today and is getting even better. Do either one of you have any concerns about the future? Is the future are we going to get too big? Are we going to lose anything in this expansion of our size? Because we are growing dramatically. Not just Collingwood, the region's growing dramatically.
You really got to think region, and not. We tried so hard at On the Bay magazine to not be Collingwood centric in terms of our editorial offerings.
I noticed that.
Thornbury, Creemore, even and Meaford. This is all part of Southern Georgian Bay. But Peter, there is another demographic that people are only now awakening to, that's going to build out the population base even more than our generation has. And that's every one of those 40 people that you know who transitioned that way, half of them have kids that are now in their 30s and who don't want to climb the corporate ladder in Toronto, don't want to live the life of a Torontonian, and are weekending, and then all of a sudden you don't have to be at the office any longer.
No.
So there's a whole new thing. So people, the definition of a weekend has changed. It's no longer just Friday and Saturday. You have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Mondayers. You have midweekers that, and then to go back to go to theater on the weekend. It's all changing, and this new demographic who want to live in downtown Collingwood and have their kids walk to school. That's a whole new demographic. That wasn't us, because we didn't move into downtown Collingwood. At least most of the skiers didn't.
Right.
We had our place outside at Cranberry or a chalet or a farm up in the hills, and so this is a whole different migration that's happening right now. And you say, well, where's the work up here? Because we no longer have the industry. The work is that this has become the entrepreneurial capital of the country, and the reason is because of those kids in their 30s and 40s. They have to start a business.
Dr. Foote did profess this.
Yeah.
He said that quality of life will be the rationale for people to locate in different places. So, and it was hard for me to believe that people would turn down double income jobs for a better quality of life, but truly he was right. People want better lifestyles.
They do, but remember too that some of those people are having their cake and eating it too.
They are,
because they've got a big salary in Toronto, and they've got enough freedom that they can be up here a lot of the week. And I know some of them, including my son, who spends as much time up here as he can, and he runs a big ad agency in Toronto. So, and what does he want to do long term? He wants to be here. So we actually created a term for that demographic, and we wrote about it in the magazine about 10 years ago. And they're called NATs, N-A-T-S. Mm-hmm. Now, there would be no way you'd guess unless you remember that story, and that was 10 years ago. A NAT is a naturally attracted 30-something. So a naturally attracted 30-somethings are people that they're not retiring, but they're attracted by that lifestyle. So we put that up. I've written to David Foote and given him that term that he can feel free to use where else it exists. But he says, it doesn't exist that many places.
David Foote truly was brilliant. He foresaw that women's hockey, which was almost non-existent when he wrote his document, was going to be the savior of arenas in Ontario, because the women's hockey was going to grow exponentially and the male-dominated sport was going to reduce dramatically. And today is exactly that situation has occurred.
He made one mistake though, and if you were at that conference out on the highway, it was that he predicted that bird watching would become huge.
Yes, he did.
Do you remember that?
Yes, he did. But in defense of David, from a North American position, bird watching is one of the top 5 things people do, which I can't believe. The number one thing in recreation master plans over the last 5 years, which I've been engaged in developing, is single lane bikes. It's no longer the lawn bowling, the arenas, the pools, it's outdoor exercise, somewhat independent of group functions, but safe. So a lot of people don't want to ride on roads, they want to ride on a single lane on the side or the boulevard. Guys, we got to stop at this point right here, and we're going to be right back after a moment.
One of the unique things about First Light is the fact that we light the site by candlelight, which makes it really unique. We're rated as one of the top 100 festivals and events across the province for that reason. And I think the fact that it's done by candlelight as opposed to electric light really sets us apart. We have many, many Francophone First Nation entertainers, so that really speaks to the rich fabric and culture. We really feel that we capture that spirit of the cultural significance of what happens here at Ste. Marie, what happens throughout the Christmas season, and really gives, I think, visitors, the opportunity to look back on the cultural roots of the province, and it's something that you can't experience anywhere else in Ontario.
So one of the last issues I'd like to discuss with you two, now this has provided all of us with a spectacular ability to do 5 things at once. So with our phones, we can see dates and projections, and we can buy stock, and we can do almost anything off these things. Do you see any challenges or dangers in the future about the focus, because our arts, culture, and heritage is about people getting together in social aspects. And I sometimes worry about the phone diminishing the desire of younger folks wanting to get together because they can almost do everything from their phone. Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's the story of you're sitting there and you look over in the restaurant and there's a table full of kids all on their phones and they're talking to each other on the phone. I mean, that's, it really breaks down the interpersonal relationship.
Yes, and from a educator point of view, I see that all the time. It's almost like I'm putting a capital punishment forward by saying, take all your phones and put them on your desk and turn them off. You can almost hear the gasping going through the room. It's because they're so used to that. So I'm just a little bit concerned that the predominance of this screen and the screen time from 2004 has gone like this, exponentially up. Screen time from TV, laptop, and has gone dramatically up. At the same time, the social problems of emotional aspects of that same group has also driven upwards the same way. So I'm just wondering if there's things in our lifetime that we've seen grow and be positive. Is there a worry that the cell phone might interact in a negative way with arts, culture, and heritage? Will people want to watch the phone instead of going to the live performance at the station to see jazz? Will they do their research here versus reading your magazine? Well, what impact is there, or we don't have a handle on it?
I think there is a huge impact, and I think that we have to differentiate direct communication, texting, emailing, from social media. And I think that they're very different. And I think that where the problem lies is in the preoccupation of social media. The amount of time that the gazillions of people who are on Facebook, who are literally using Facebook all day to try and track their friends or to track what's going on, to Twitter madness and to other ways that social media uses up time, because that's not direct communication with people.
I agree.
That's an intermediary. Whereas at least I'm probably in better touch with my kids who live in London, England, Bangkok, LA, and Toronto by email, by FaceTime. FaceTime's a great positive thing because it allows people who can't be together to actually see, almost, sense each other much better. But the social media, where they're using another device to interact like Facebook, to me, that is a real worry, and I can only hope that as we've heard some people say, I'm off Facebook, I'm out of that, you know, either for security reasons or because I don't want to live my life that way. I'm hoping that it will be it'll be a fad. What will replace it, we don't know. But I think on the other side, on you know, texting, for instance, was big in Europe 10, 15 years ago. It only came here in the last 10 years, where people, and only more recently, where people are texting. I think that kind of quick, direct communication with people that you're going to be seeing by the end of the day is fine. My problem is social media per se.
I have a box of telephones that I've kept from my career, and it's a big box, and they go way back to the 80s when those big, almost army-looking handsets with the big antennas that weighed about 15 pounds apiece, and you had to have a special
well, and the
belt
battery
loop.
pack that was
Yeah.
Oh,
So I had all those, and I take them and put them on the table to these new millennials, and I said, okay, let's guess the years of all this stuff. And they're just befounded to look at this stuff and go, I saw that on TV once. You know, the big ones?
Yeah.
And the different little teeny phones, they went into a small phone aspect with a flip, and then they've gotten bigger again. So you can see the evolution of this communication device, and it's huge.
Yes.
Guys, it's been really great and interesting. I thank you so much for the information you've helped us with, and I'm sure we left a lot of crumbs that people can take by research aspect and go and find out about Frank's background, or what Frank talked about this, or Jeffrey's positions and things. The final question for you, Jeff, and I don't mean it to be a difficult one, but we haven't talked about your combination of taking editing and business together to do your current position. So it's an interesting relationship. I mean,
you mean the new general manager of the radio station?
It's very interesting. I mean, I became aware of that because I always listened to that station.
Right.
Because as I grew older, I would have different stations for different things I did in my life. So there was a country and western station when I was going to be doing something of one side, and then there was the classical music side that I discovered, and I said, now, I always listen to classical music on the discs and on the records, but I never listen to it as much as I do currently. And it's not a promotion for you. I'm just saying it's an interesting combination that you're an editor, but you also now are doing something, managing a radio station.
Well,
so the crossovers.
So one small point. I'm not an editor. I'm a publisher. Now, it's important to understand that difference. So a publisher has the responsibility for both the business as well as the spirit of the magazine. If you were doing a theatrical production, it would be the producer. So in a brand new show, the producer hires the director. He's kind of the business and the spirit of the venture, and so that's what I'm doing with the radio station. I'm playing the role of a producer. I am thinking through, how could this radio station be better? Well, we've got 16 years of great content in On the Bay. What if we took all the historical inside back cover looking backs and asked Janet to rewrite them for radio? You write very differently for radio, and it has to be obviously much shorter. And so we've repurposed editorial excerpts from the magazine onto radio, and then sold them to sponsors who would sponsor looking back, sponsor history notes.
Great move.
And we've done that with maybe 5 or 6 things in the magazine, including Grassroots Heroes and other aspects where it's genuine editorial repurposed for radio and sold not as advertisements, but of sponsored editorial spots on the radio.
Part of the quality of life.
Yeah. So it's just it's actually quite a natural combination. We're both local media. We now broadcast. One little bragging point. We're the first local radio station to broadcast to all of Ontario.
Yes.
So we're right from Kingston to Hamilton. Bill Anderson on his 10 to 3 show is talking to everybody in Ontario.
Well, there's people around the world he's talking to because with the
Yes.
event of the computer,
Yeah, that's true.
He was talking to somebody from Havana and somebody from Australia, and it's just interesting to hear. Oh, I'm calling in from.
Yeah.
Oh, that's I'm listening to you, and I'm in Vienna. Wow. Thank you, Frank, very much for sharing your stuff with me today, and thank you for all the work you've done in this community to date. It's been a big step forward. And Jeff, same thing. You guys have brought in things to improve, and that's what it's all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media. This is Rogers TV, Collingwood.
What kind of show do you want to see on Rogers TV? What interests you? Log on to rogerstv.com, fill out a show proposal, and tell us about your segment idea. We want to know what you want to see. Rogers TV, only on Rogers.
Safe channels for motorized boats, especially with deeper drafts, are generally marked with channel markers. Most are red or green, and are either floating ones, called buoys, or on shore, called day beacons. Another caution you should be aware of is this: a diving flag. A diving flag indicates diving activity in progress, and you should stay at least 100 feet away.
After involving Nuha in this program, she feels very confident. Here you have a lot of opportunity.
I learned a lot of stuff, like being kind and I'm more open-minded.
This is Rogers TV, Collingwood.
Next witness is Dave McNulty.
Title is fine. Dave McNulty.
Please confirm.
N-A-L-T-Y.
Do you swear?
Good afternoon, Mr. McNulty. You are the manager, fleet, facilities, and purchasing for the town of Collingwood, is that correct?
That's correct.
And I understand that you've held this position since 2009, is that right?
Yes.
And prior to working for the town, as I understand it, you worked at an ethanol plant called Amazingly Green, is that correct?
Yes.
And Amazingly Green's predecessor, which was the Nacan starch plant. Do I have that right?
Yes.
What positions did you hold at Amazingly Green and Nacan before that?
Starting from the beginning, I guess, I started at the starch plant at Nacan as a draftsman, proceeded into managing projects, got involved with engineering and maintenance, and became the engineering and maintenance manager. When the announcement that was made that the plant was going to be shut down, I became involved with the transition team and looked after the plant closure. Then myself and one other individual were charged with looking after the plant through a sale process to what would be the developers of the ethanol plant. And I stayed on as to assist with the process of designing and constructing the ethanol portion of the plant. We went through the startup, and for a period of a year plus, I was the plant manager.
And is that a year up until the time you stopped working at Amazingly Green?
Yes, I was the plant manager at the time I finished there.
Do you recall when you became the engineering and maintenance manager at Nacan?
Would be in the 90s, probably mid-90s.
In the various roles you held at Nacan and then Amazingly Green, what experience did you obtain with respect to procurement?
On a daily basis, we would deal with procurement of one sort or another. In the 90s, the corporation also had a major portion, evolution, to change procurement policies, primarily to drive the expense out of our operation. I would be involved with bid documents. I would be involved with contracts, as well as being involved with the day-to-day purchases and how we were going to go about obtaining what we needed.
In those roles, did you ever participate in a procurement on the scale that would be similar to the two Sprung structures in 2012?
early on would have been in the 80s, I was involved with a warehouse expansion, which was probably a couple $1 million. In the 90s, it would be the late 90s, we did a $9 million process expansion, which included building a whole proprietary process and all the buildings and amenities that went with that. Subsequent to that, we did a $6 million wastewater treatment plant expansion. Two of those would have been a design build process, and one of them was a more traditional engineer, design, procure process.
Which one was the more traditional process?
The $9 million process expansion.
Looking at the $9 million process expansion and the wastewater treatment project, what was your role in those procurements?
The process expansion, I was part of a corporate engineering team that put the project together. I was, I suppose, the site representative on the project because some corporate forces came in to assist with that project. The wastewater treatment plant expansion was done more in-house, where we engaged a process consultant to assist in defining a performance spec for the waste treatment plant, and then went out to market to find a design build contractor to build it. And then I supervised the construction.
With respect to the waste treatment design build contract, I take it from your answer that was done by way of an RFP process, is that correct?
It may not have been open market, but there was at least an invitational RFP process, yes.
And with the $9 million process expansion, was there a competitive element of that procurement?
Yes, it went out to public tender.
At a high level, what's your education background?
I'm a construction technologist. It's not a term you hear often, but it's like a civil technologist, except it's all to do with buildings.
And is that something you earned a degree or a diploma in?
A diploma.
From where?
Conestoga College.
And in what year?
In 84.
Do you have any, oh, sorry, I didn't.
Maybe 83, somewhere there.
Do you have any training in architecture?
From that program, that's what we did as our projects, was designing and producing working drawings for buildings in each of the 3 years of the program. And then, I guess, relative to that, working as a draftsman in the early days at the starch plant, that's essentially what I was tasked with from a industrial plant point of view.
Give us a sense of what you would be drafting as a draftsman, just at a high level.
The processes, schematics for the processes, layouts for the processes, and the buildings that would surround them.
Prior to the Sprung project in 2012, did you have any experience in the design or construction of recreation facilities?
No.
What led you to join the town in 2009?
I had left the ethanol plant, and the job with the town was posted. I applied for it and won the competition.
Do you recall who you interviewed with for the job?
HR representative at the time, I think it was Jennifer Pearson. I think Ed Houghton was there. May have been a third. I can't recall.
And when you were hired, who did you report to?
Ed Houghton.
And what was his role as you understood at that point in time?
Director of Public Works and Engineering. From the town's point of view, and CEO, I think it was, of Collis from the utility point of view.
Did who you reported to change over time between when you were hired and the summer of 2012?
Yes, when CAO Wingrove, when Ms. Wingrove was the CAO, she wanted to have more direct contact with the projects that I was working on, so I started to report to the CAO.
And when Ms. Wingrove's employment was terminated, what happened then?
I continued to report to the CAO.
At that time, Mr. Houghton?
Yes.
Can you explain, again, at a high level, what your job responsibilities were in 2012 as the manager of fleet facilities and purchasing?
From a fleet perspective, maintaining accurate records of what we had in our fleet, including all other rolling stock, not just cars and trucks. Ensuring that those were adequately insured, that they were maintained, recommending replacement, determining life cycles. From a facilities point of view, day-to-day maintenance of facilities, again, making sure that all the facilities had adequate insurance coverage, renovation or improvement projects to facilities, and from a purchasing perspective, I guess on facilities, I guess I could also add to that supervision of contractors that we might bring in to do either renovation projects or maintenance work. In terms of purchasing, I acted as a facilitator mostly for the various departments of the town to assist and help them work through their procurement activities. So I would help to develop tenders and RFPs and RFQs. I would manage, with the assistance of the clerk's department, I would manage the advertising and the posting of the documents and the actual tendering or the bid processes. And then I would be involved with the bid openings and the subsequent evaluations and award of the whatever opportunity it was.
When you say you would assist with the development of the tenders and the RFPs, RFQs, what would you do to assist in the development generally?
It would depend on the project. Sometimes I would, using our templates that we had at the time, I would develop a draft of a project scope on my own through discussions with them, and then circulate that for their input, and we would normally go through a few revisions. Or some of the more experienced departments would develop that, develop those documents themselves and then send them to me for review. I might make some edits, and we'd come to a final document and then be ready to move on with the rest of the process. And then I would assist with the technical part of getting the documents posted and going through the bid process.
When you joined the town, did you receive any training or instruction on the purchasing bylaw that was in place at the time?
No formal training. I received a copy of the bylaw.
Did anyone explain to you the provisions of the bylaw, how it operated?
I'm sure that we had discussions about it, but I don't recall any formal training on it.
Another document that we've seen that is referenced in the purchasing bylaw is the Unsolicited Proposals Guideline. Is that something you became familiar with in your role as Manager of Fleet Facilities and Purchasing?
Yes.
Did you receive any training on that document?
No, it would be similar, perhaps a discussion on it, but no formal, nothing more formal than that.
Other than those two documents, the purchasing bylaw and the Unsolicited Proposals Guideline, what other resources were available to you in 2012 on how to conduct procurements?
The town had a series of templates that could be used for various purposes. So there was an RFP template. There were tender templates that were commonly used for engineering projects. I think there was an RFQ template as well, and using those templates, we kind of developed other templates for specific purposes if they didn't fit.
We could pull up the purchasing bylaw, TOC 0517154. And while we're pulling that up, I asked you whether you received training on the bylaw or the Unsolicited Proposals Guideline. Did you receive any training more generally about how the town approached procurements or anything along those lines?
I guess the only thing that comes to mind when I started with the town was although it's contained in the bylaw, the practice of how projects would be awarded and what council's involvement would be was something I had to learn as I came to the town.
So how did you come to learn that?
General conversation and watching.
Conversation with who?
Probably the clerk and the treasurer.
What did you learn in that process about council's involvement with procurements?
Essentially, I guess the process of when something had to go to council for approval, how it would be presented to council, so in a staff report, what the structure of the staff report would be like, and those sort of basic mechanical things.
In 2012, what role did you understand council was to play when it came to a town procurement?
They would have the authority to approve, again, depending on the amount of the spend and whether they needed to be involved in that approval or whether it could be approved at a department head level.
Did they have any role in either the development of a procurement or the operation of a procurement? We could go to page 3 of the purchasing bylaw. And if you see, this is in the definition section of the bylaw, and subparagraph Q has a defined title called Purchasing Manager, and it says, the purchasing manager shall mean the individual responsible for ensuring that the purchasing bylaw, policies, and procedures are consistently applied in the corporation, and who serves as a resource to departments in support of the purchasing function. In the absence of a purchasing manager, the department head of the department responsible for the use of goods and services shall be deemed to be the purchasing manager. In 2012, were you the purchasing manager as defined in the bylaw?
Generally, and in terms of my function, yes. I would say that responsibility for ensuring, the way that it states that, was a shared responsibility between myself and the department head.
And when you say the department head, do you mean as with respect to the department head overseeing the procurement or purchase at issue?
Yes, depending on whose budget it was coming out of.
Other than yourself and the department head whose budget the purchase was coming out of, was there anyone else responsible on staff for ensuring that the bylaw and related policies were applied when a procurement proceeded?
The purchasing bylaw fell under the Treasury Department. And so the treasurer had an interest in ensuring that the bylaw was being followed. And second to that, of course, the CAO would have ultimate responsibility.
After you joined the town and got a sense of how purchasing and procurements proceeded, what was your impression about whether or not, as a general matter, those procurements proceeded in accordance with the bylaw?
It varied by department and varied by department, I guess, and perhaps also varied by the nature of the project. And so one of the things that I set out to do was to try to get everybody working to the same set of standards that would comply with the bylaw. Have everybody follow the same processes as opposed to everybody have their unique processes.
Was that something you were able to achieve?
It certainly got much better over time.
And in the summer of 2012, at that point in time, what was your general impression in terms of whether procurements proceeded in accordance with the bylaw?
It had certainly improved since there was one individual that was attempting to move everybody in the same direction, as opposed to there being nobody doing that. Were we all the way there in 2012? Certainly not.
And at the risk of asking the obvious, are you the individual who's trying to move everyone in the same direction?
Yes.
Okay. In 2012, at that point in time, if you needed guidance or had a question about how to deal with something in relation to a purchase or a procurement, who would you speak to?
Depending on the nature of the issue, it would be the the department head as well, but if it was to understand how to proceed in terms of the bylaw, it would be the clerk or the treasurer, depending on the nature of the question.
Do you recall, prior to the Sprung decision in 2012, whether you had ever sought legal advice with respect to any town procurements?
Not that I can recall.
That's something that you understood was available to you if you had a legal question?
Yes.
Prior to the decision to proceed with the Sprung purchases by way of sole source, had you been involved in any other sole source purchases for the town prior to the Sprung decision?
No.
What was your understanding in 2000?
There were several instances set out in the bylaw where if a purchase met the criteria, you could go outside of a regular tender. One, as I remember, was the extension of consulting work where it made sense because of a change in project direction. There were opportunities to single source purchases if based on the evaluation of the information there was a deemed benefit to the town to proceed in that manner. Sole sourcing is also addressed in there, in the bylaw. I forget what the wording was around it, but it was spoken to in the bylaw.
So if we could pull the bylaw back up, which is TOC 517154 and go to page 5. Scroll down to section 6.7. So 6.7 discusses circumstances where competitive tendering may not be desirable, and if we continue scrolling down onto the next page, it lists circumstances. It lists examples of those circumstances. When you were talking about the portion of the bylaw that set out when competitive tendering did not need to be followed, is this the section you were referring to?
That's correct.
Are there any other sections of the bylaw, to your knowledge, that deal with when competitive tendering cannot be followed?
There's a section on consulting that speaks about a roster of consultants.
Any other sections?
That I can recall at the moment.
If we could scroll up in this document a bit. Right, staying with 6.7, so down. So, like I said, it sets out the circumstances in which competitive tendering may be undesirable. The first subparagraph A deals with emergency situations. And then if we look at subparagraph B, it talks about conditions may dictate that the conduct of negotiations for the acquisition of goods and or services, provided that the clerk has received either verbal or written authorization prior to the start of negotiations with any supplier. Negotiations may be authorized when any of the following conditions apply. And we see in subsection B to that, it identifies where there is only one known source of goods or services, brackets sole source. Backing up to the language introducing that list, it contemplates someone providing the clerk with verbal or written authorization to proceed with direct negotiations. Do you know who was capable of providing the clerk that direction or authorization?
I would was provided the clerk with the authorization?
Yes, so in...
Has received. I guess my understanding of that would be that authorization to the clerk would come from the CAO or higher.
And was that something you understood was a requirement of the purchasing bylaw in 2012 in order to proceed with, sole sourcing or one of the other options here, that either the clerk or either the CAO or someone higher had to give the clerk authorization?
That's certainly what the bylaw says, and that's what would be my understanding of it. Was that necessarily practiced at that point in time? I couldn't be sure.
When you say the CEO or someone higher or something higher than that, what's higher than the CAO?
Counsel.
Stepping back from the wording of the bylaw specifically, in 2012, what was your understanding about who would make the decision whether or not, for instance, the criteria of subsection B, which defines a sole source, had been met?
I would think counsel.
When you say I would think, is that something you knew at the time, or is that something you're assessing today as you look at it?
I don't think I recall another sole source of anything significant. So at the time, it wouldn't have been top of mind. That would be the way I would read it today.
And just to be sure, when we talk about the decision to proceed with the Sprung buildings, it was this subsection B of subsection B that defines sole source. That's the provision under which that decision could proceed by way of sole source. Is that correct?
Yes.
I have some questions now about the Executive Management Committee that was established after Mr. Houghton became the acting CAO. As a staff member who was reporting to the CAO at the time, what was your understanding of the role of the EMC when it was formed?
That it was an advisory body to the CAO that could assist with the day-to-day operations of the town.
What sort of matters did you understand they were providing the CAO with advice?
Anything from HR issues to public inquiries to really any of the business of the town, whatever the subject of the day might be. Each of them, the members of the EMT had their own specialties and could advise on their area of expertise.
Was it your understanding that any member of the EMC could make a decision that had previously been within the purview of the CAO?
Not in isolation.
What do you mean by not in isolation?
It was a collaborative group that would openly discuss whatever the issue was, and they would come to either a consensus or a decision based on that discussion. That was my impression.
Do you recall if you ever were present when the AMC made a decision of
I was, from time to time, I may have attended an EMC meeting where certain issues were discussed. I don't recall a specific decision that I can relate to.
Speaking more generally, when Mr. Houghton became the acting CAO, did the frequency or the nature of contact you had with him in his capacity as CAO change as compared to Kim Wingrove?
No, I wouldn't say so.
How did you communicate with Mr. Houghton?
On an issue by issue basis, would probably normally be by email. And with both Mr. Houghton and Ms. Wingrove, I had a regular meeting time. Was it once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever it was, where we had a scheduled time slot to discuss whatever we needed to discuss.
If there was an instance in which Mr. Houghton wasn't available and you needed a decision or direction, was it your understanding you could go to another member of the EMC and obtain that direction or decision?
Only if it was in their purview.
And what do you mean by only if it was in their purview?
Oh, if it was a financial question, I could speak with the treasurer. If it was a procedural question, I could speak to the clerk. If it was, at the same time, if it was a department-specific question, I could go directly to the department head. And at that point, I guess I would be escalating it to them. They could decide whether to give me direction or whether I needed to take it to CAO.
So I take it from that answer, if a member of the EMC gave you direction with respect to something you brought to them, you would follow that direction? As a general matter?
Yeah, likely.
When do you recall first becoming aware that the town may consider purchasing one or multiple fabric membranes for recreation facilities?
There had been earlier investigations back as far as 2009 or 10 on either an agricultural style fabric building over the outdoor rink, or there was discussion about an air supported structure at one point in time. And those options didn't proceed to any extent after the investigations. And then I suppose the next time it came up was in regards to the Sprung structures.
I'm going to ask you more about what was looked into in 2009, 2010 with respect to covering the outdoor arena. But before I do that, do you recall when you first became aware of the possibility of the Sprung structures being an option for the recreation facilities?
There was a meeting to discuss options, I believe, at the library with council, where the sales information, and by that I just mean pictures and brochures of Sprung structures was circulated.
So you recall a meeting with council at the library where pictures and brochures are circulated. Do you recall who was circulating the pictures or brochures?
I believe they came from the deputy mayor.
Do you recall what was discussed about the Sprung structures at the meeting you recall?
at that point only that this is an option that we should be looking at.
And who was making that suggestion that this should be an option that we should look at?
I think the deputy mayor.
We see in the documents that on June 11th, 2012, council had a meeting at the library in which council members were invited to share ideas or talk about what they wanted to see with recreation facilities. It was called a strategic planning session or workshop. Is that the meeting you're recalling at the library where Sprung brochures were available?
Sounds like it.
Do you recall attending any other meetings at the library where council members discussed recreation facilities?
There was subsequent meetings that I attended. I can't remember if they were at the library or may have been here.
So before the meeting at the library that you recall, you mentioned that the town in 2009 or 2010 had discussed and looked into the possibility of covering the outdoor arena with a fabric structure as well as an air structure. And when you say that, are you referring to a compressed air bubble?
Yes.
Were you involved in the investigations at that point in time into whether those would be feasible for the outdoor arena?
I was involved in the case of the fabric structure. The air-supported structure, I was not involved in.
And what was determined in terms of whether or not the hockey arena could be covered with a fabric structure?
Ultimately, there were issues with building code related issues. I think in terms of flame spread rating and those technical issues. It was also going to be difficult to incorporate any insulation into the structure. One of the ideals that the town had set out at that time was to install sprinklers in any new construction. That would be not impossible, but difficult. I think the real reason it was shelved was it would have been very difficult to get around the building code issues.
If we could turn up TOC 34069. This is a staff report from February 20th, 2010. And if we could go down to page 2, the staff report was looking at enclosure options with respect to the outdoor arena. If you scroll down, you see there's a heading there called fabric cover system. Does this reflect the results of the investigation you undertook in 2009, 2010 into the viability of a fabric cover for the arena?
Yes, I believe that was the basis for what went into.
And when Sprung became a potential option in 2012, did you return to the work you'd done in 2009 and 2010 and consider the limitations you identified at that point in time?
Yes.
Did you determine that these limitations continue to exist?
The exact time frame of this, I can't say off the top of my head, but in one of the, perhaps the first meeting that I was involved with Sprung, I had a list of questions which essentially came out of this investigation to confirm whether their structure would be able to meet the requirements that a agricultural style building would not.
And do you remember what requirements the agricultural style building would not meet?
It was to do with the combustibility of the building and the requirement for sprinklers. I seem to remember something about exiting requirements as well, but may have been a side issue.
And so you recall attending a meeting with Sprung where you have a list of issues you want addressed. Did you raise those with Sprung at that meeting?
I believe so, yes.
Do you remember who from Sprung was at that meeting?
Not without seeing a list of attendees. I mean, a list of invitees even.
Recall if Tom Lloyd from Sprung was at that meeting?
Tom was certainly at one of the early meetings.
Do you recall if he was at the meeting where your list of concerns were discussed?
I think so. I know that he was at one of the early meetings, and I know that those types of issues were discussed, and my sense is it was likely the same meeting.
Do you recall if Dave McNeil from Sprung was at that meeting?
That name is familiar as well. They may have both been there. I'm unsure.
Do you remember what Sprung said to you that addressed your concerns?
They essentially stated that in answer to my questions, they had a positive response that their structure would meet the requirements of the building code on those bases.
Did you verify the answers that Sprung provided you with anyone else at the town?
No.
Did you verify them with anyone outside of the town? Is there any reason why you wouldn't verify those answers with someone in the town who may know about this provision of the building code?
At that point in time, that would have been, I wouldn't have had the information to be able to intelligently present it to the building department, for instance. Essentially what it comes down to is they would state that the material that they built the structure out of had a flame spread rating of under some number, and if that number is under the requirements of the building code, then that would be the answer. So I think that review by the building department came along much later.
Do you know if the building department conducted any review prior to the August 27th, 2012 council meeting?
I don't know.
Is that a review you would expect it to have been done prior to that meeting?
Not necessarily, because if it came time to get the building permit and the building wouldn't meet the requirements of the building code, then there'd just be no building permit and it wouldn't go forward.
Would there have been anything preventing you or someone at the town from bringing the information to the building department prior to August 27th to ensure that what Sprung was saying about its building complied with the building code?
Nothing to say that we couldn't, other than we, at that point, just didn't have the information.
Did you gather that information?
Only if it was included in the literature that they provided us.
Do you know if anyone from the building department was consulted at any point in time prior to August 27th, 2012?
Perhaps in general conversation, but not in any formal manner.
Do you recall if you personally had any conversations with anyone in the building department?
I don't recall specifically. I may have, but I don't recall.
Excuse me. If we could turn up paragraph 177 of the foundation document. So this is an email dated June 25th, 2012. And it says, from you to Dave McNeil at Sprung, and you say, further to our conversation last week, we have been piecing together some background information for the two sites. And then it says that you provided with Mr. McNeil with a series of aerial photographs of Heritage Park. And you also then sent information about the intent for the arena, more aerial views, drawings for the outdoor rink, and photos of Central Park. Do you recall having a conversation with Sprung at some point in the week prior to June 25th, 2012?
So there's a possibility, I think, that this is relating to the, did you say June 11th meeting?
The strategic planning session at the library happened on June 11th, 2012.
Okay, so then there was a subsequent meeting, I believe, with Sprung representatives. And that would be the meeting, perhaps, that this is speaking to?
This subsequent meeting, were you in attendance at it?
I was in attendance at a subsequent meeting.
So if we could go...
Can't confirm the date.
To paragraph 175. This is an email from Tom Lloyd of Sprung to Dennis Seymour, copying Dave McNeil and Patrick Mills of Sprung. And in it, Tom Lloyd thanks Mr. Seymour for a meeting yesterday. We look forward to assisting you with your plans. You're not copied on this email or mentioned on this email. Do you recall Dennis Seymour attending a meeting with Sprung in and around June 19th, 2012?
That's quite possible. I don't have a specific recollection of the individual meeting and who was there, but I certainly recall being in meetings with Sprung representatives where Dennis was there.
In paragraph 177, we saw that you were sending Sprung aerial photos and other information. Do you know why you were sending Sprung that information at that point in time?
Because I was asked to do that at the meeting.
Who asked you to do that at the meeting?
If Yale.
And do you have an understanding of why the CAO had asked you to provide that information to Sprung?
Because there was a desire to get Sprung to provide a concept and a budget, a budget estimate on what their facilities would look like and what they'd cost.
When you say there was desire to get Sprung to provide a budget estimate, was that the purpose of having the meeting that you're recalling?
The meeting that I'm recalling there was, in my recollection, was an introductory meeting where the benefits of their product were being presented, and as the meeting evolved, it kind of concluded with, well, we'll provide you information on our locations and facilities, and you come back to us with a concept and a budget.
And do I have it correct from your earlier answer that it was Mr. Houghton who ended the meeting on that note?
I believe so.
Do you recall what potential Sprung structures were discussed at that meeting?
Either covering the outdoor rink or a single pad arena that could be that could evolve into a twin pad arena. I think those were the considerations at that point.
Do you know if covering the pool was discussed at that meeting? Or do you recall?
I don't recall that.
We go to, let me back up. You've indicated that representatives from Sprung were at the meeting and it may have been Mr. Lloyd or Mr. McNeil. Is that correct?
It may have been Mr. Lloyd. I know that Mr. Lloyd was in town. I believe that Dave McNeil was in town. Not a face to the and it could have been all three of those gentlemen, including Mr. Mills, but I can't remember.
Focusing on town representatives, you were there. It sounds like Mr. Houghton was there. Mr. Seymour may have been there. Was there anyone else from the town that you recall being at that meeting?
I think the mayor was there.
When you say you think, why? It sounds like you don't have a clear recollection.
I remember one of the early meetings, the mayor was at the table because I think she was sitting next to me. And So that's why I can recall, and I would think it was the introductory meeting that she was there for.
So if we could go to paragraph 201 of the foundation document. So this paragraph contemplates an exchange of emails between Pam Hogg and Deputy Mayor Lloyd, which essentially result in a calendar invite being sent for a July 11th, 2012 meeting with the Deputy Mayor, yourself, Mayor Sandra Cooper, Tom Lloyd, Dave McNeil, and Pat Mills. Do you recall if the meeting that is contemplated took place on July 11th?
I don't have a specific recollection, but it certainly could have.
Do you recall being in more than one meeting with the mayor and representatives from Sprung?
Certainly with representatives from Sprung. I would be unsure about the other attendees.
And my question is really, do you have any recollection of attending more than one meeting where there's representatives of Sprung there and the mayor is also there?
No specific recollection.
Would it be common for the mayor to attend a meeting with a potential supplier?
Would it be common in other procurement processes? No. This was, however, sort of a unique approach for the time.
What was unique about the approach at this point in time?
It wasn't a traditional design engineer tender project. It was leaning towards the idea of sole sourcing a product.
And just to assist you in the chronology as we see it in the documents, the meeting contemplated here would have occurred on July 11th, 2012. There's a council meeting on July 16th, 2012, in which council directs staff to investigate the construction of a single pad arena and covering the outdoor pool with a fabric building. Do you recall if the possibility of a sole source was something that was contemplated before the July 16th, 2012 council meeting?
I don't recall that there was any interesting product that might fulfill our needs.
So going back to my original question, which was, do you know, or maybe I didn't put it to you this way, but I'll put it this way. Do you know why the mayor was at an early meeting with Sprung when they are presenting a product that may be able to address the town's needs?
That's what salesmen do. The salesmen want to have the right, they want to have the key players, the key representatives in their audience when they present their information.
I appreciate that might be what Sprung wants. From your perspective as a manager responsible for purchasing, was it something you thought it was appropriate to have the mayor at a meeting with a potential supplier?
Probably not, but that wasn't in my I wasn't asked.
Do you know how it came about that the mayor was at the meeting?
No.
Do you recall raising this issue with anyone at the time?
No.
You said that you weren't asked whether or not it was appropriate for her to be there. Why would it not be appropriate in your view for her to be there?
Because it tends to open the door of opportunity for the salesman to try and influence a potential future sale.
And what's the problem with that? It's in government, in municipal or any government, that's deemed to be interference and inappropriate. And I'm just trying to get a sense of what your understanding was at the time. What, it's deemed to be interference and inappropriate. From your perspective, what's the risk of interference? What's the inappropriateness that can arise?
We're talking about the mayor in attendance.
Yes.
So, the mayor in that case could be undue influenced and lose their objectivity on the subject.
Was there a risk that also staff members could lose their objectivity or be influenced at this point in time?
That's a risk. Well, that's why you have the check and the balance.
And what's the check and the balance?
Meaning that staff needs to collaboratively come to a conclusion as to what they're going to recommend, and council then has the opportunity and responsibility to challenge that and ensure that they agree with the recommendation of staff.
Was there a reason that you didn't raise this potential concern at this point in time in the process?
With the group of individuals involved, it wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't my place.
And what was it about that group of individuals that led you to that conclusion?
Their relative position in the town management and hierarchy.
And who are the group of individuals you're referring to?
CAO, specific to this, the CAO, the mayor, deputy mayor, if he was involved.
Do you recall if the deputy mayor was involved?
I don't have a specific recollection of him being at particular meetings.
Setting aside for a moment the mayor's presence at the meeting, do you recall if you had any concerns about this point in time about having members of staff attend a meeting with a potential supplier and how that may affect that supplier's ability to participate in a RFP down the road, or the town's ability to conduct an RFP when a supplier has already met with members of the town?
How did you start out that question?
Well, it was a long question. Do you remember if you had any concern about meeting with a potential supplier at this point in time from a future procurement perspective?
At this point in time, no, because in my mind at this point in time, it was an investigative process. It was to learn about the product, learn about the potential, determine if it was something to pursue going forward.
When in your mind did the investigative process, when it came to Sprung, come to an end?
Certainly before staff were putting their mind to developing the staff report. So this was July 11th. And now I could say maybe by the 1st of August, the investigative process should have been done.
I'm just looking at my questions and I'm moving on to something else. I don't know if now is a good time or if you want to keep going. And it's Mr. McDonald.
understand someone's got some teaching to do, so we'll stop at 4:45.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Please give our regards to Mr. Hoffa.
Well, I figured I was in the right seat to raise the issue today, so.
Before we took the break, Mr. McNulty, you had described a meeting that you recall where the mayor was in attendance. You also described a meeting in which Sprung provided a form of introduction, and at the end of the meeting, you were directed to provide Sprung with some additional information so that Sprung could come back with some pricing. Do you recall if that was the same meeting or two separate meetings?
My recollection would be it would be the same meeting.
Would we turn up paragraph 219 of the foundation document? This paragraph reflects that on July 16th at 4:04 p.m., Dave McNeil sent Deputy Mayor Rick Lloyd a link with 3 budgets to Sprung Turnkey Structures. You're copied on the email. Do you recall receiving these budgets from Sprung on July 16th?
I recall receiving budgets on conceptual structures.
And would you consider what's described here? Does this look like budgets on conceptual structures? We can open them up if it assists.
Based on the time frame, these would have been preliminary budgets. I'm suspecting that after this date, there was more discussion on what might be included in the individual structures. Which would mean the budget would change, but I would think this was preliminary budgets.
Do you know why Sprung sent these preliminary budgets at this point in time?
I would think as a response to the request in the earlier meeting.
Do you know what was done with the information that was provided by Sprung in these budgets?
I don't have a recollection at this time.
On the same day and shortly after these emails are sent, there's a council meeting that I'll have some questions about. But one of the things we see at the council meeting is there isn't a mention of the fact that Sprung has already provided some preliminary estimates. Do you know why that wasn't raised at the council meeting?
You say there was not a mention?
Yeah, it was not.
I don't know why that would be.
One of the budgets that is provided is an insulated Sprung structure to cover the existing Centennial Pool. Does that refresh your memory at all about whether there had been any discussions prior to this about the potential of covering the outdoor pool?
Well, evidently they were responding to some direction here. In the earlier information that I sent them, was there information there about the pool and Heritage Park, or was it specific to Central Park?
One of the items you sent was an aerial photo of Heritage Park.
So then that must have been part of the discussion at that time.
Do you know where the idea of potentially covering the pool came from?
No.
Prior to the interactions we've been looking at with Sprung in June and July 2012, is that something you were aware had been discussed?
So thinking about that, I should say that as part of the major redevelopment of Central Park, one of the components of that was a larger indoor pool that would satisfy the needs of the swim club and so on. How that got transferred to covering Centennial Pool with anything, I don't know.
Do you recall at any time ever being aware of anyone considering covering the Centennial Pool with any form of structure?
Not that I was aware of.
So I want to ask some questions now about the July 16th, 2012 council meeting. One of the documents that is provided to council at that meeting is a document that sets out various resolutions that the council can pass with respect to recreation facilities, divided into two general directions. One is a Direction A, to continue down the road of a multi-use recreation facility and the recommendations of this Central Park Steering Committee. And the other one is Direction B, which is identifying new options for exploration. So if we could pull up to paragraph 233 of the foundation document. And the box on the screen, if we could scroll down, are the Direction B options that were in the document I just described. Do you have any recollection of the document that I described, looking at potential resolutions for council to pass with respect to recreation facilities?
I don't believe that I had any involvement in developing it. I may have seen it.
Looking at the slide in front of you with options 1 to 10, do you know where those options came from?
I'm not 100%, but my sense would be that this came from PRC.
And with respect to specifically the options identified, do you know where the PRC got those options or how they generated those options?
Some of them, obviously, because they were topics of discussion. They were part of the work of the steering committee and so on. A theater performing arts center was another discussion going on. Maybe not in the community, but in between the community, staff, council. It was something I'd heard of before. So my sense is this was an attempt to just list out everything that everybody knew about.
Looking at the 10 options, were you asked to look into the cost, the feasibility, the parameters of any of these options prior to the July 16th meeting?
I don't believe so.
If we could go to paragraph 250. So we're going to look at, scroll down to the excerpt from the minutes. This is an excerpt from the meeting minutes. It's similar to the box we looked at, but it shows the result of council's vote. First question, it says that council directs staff to pursue the following recommended options. Do you know what it was meant by recommended options?
The ones with the checkbox.
So, and we can go back to, if you want, there was no checkboxes when it was presented. Do you know? Maybe I'll put it this way: do you know whose recommendation was it for those options, in your understanding?
I believe staff was looking for council's selection of the options that they wanted staff to look further into.
Put it this way: was it the case that these 10 options were 10 options staff recommended to council, and council could pick between the recommended options, or is it the case that staff was looking for council to recommend some of these 10 options and it would be council's recommended options, or was it something else?
I think the second one. So I think this was, at least the list was staff's attempt to list all of the options that were being talked about or were known about, and staff was putting them in front of council to have council identify which ones they were interested in.
So we see that one of the options that was selected was enclosed outdoor pool with a fabric building. Do you know why a fabric building was identified as the structure for enclosing the pool?
No, I don't.
Other than what you may have learned in your meetings with Sprung prior to this, which we've discussed, did you know anything else about fabric buildings at this point in time?
About a Sprung style fabric building, or a fabric building in general, because I had some background knowledge of what I would call agricultural style fabric buildings.
And would that be from the previous research that we talked about earlier today?
Yes.
When you say a Sprung style fabric building, what do you mean by that?
Extruded aluminum frame with an exterior membrane, insulation, and an interior membrane.
And I take it from your answer in your mind that is something different than the agricultural buildings you were looking at in 2009 and 2010?
Yes.
Do you recall if prior to this vote happening on July 16th, 2012, that distinction that you've drawn or that description that you've provided was shared with council?
What was the date of the first meeting? One that was held at the library?
June 11th, 2012.
So, I don't think that staff presented any information on the difference between the types of structures. What they may have learned that on their own from the information that was circulated at the meeting.
And similarly, council, I take it then might have learned information about sprung structures about what was circulated at that meeting. Is that fair?
Yes.
Other than what was circulated at that meeting, do you know what other information was provided to council about sprung type fabric buildings prior to July 16th, 2012?
Nothing that I'm aware of.
Prior to council recommending or voting, directing staff to proceed with these two options, do you know if any work was done to assess the feasibility of putting a sprung style fabric structure over the outdoor pool?
Nothing specifically other than I think by this point, if I have the timeline correct, I think by this point Sprung had provided the concept that they could do it.
So, and then correct me if I'm wrong, I take it from your answer that Sprung has provided the concept that they could do it, but, and I guess maybe I'll put it this way, my question is, has anyone looked at the pool itself and determined whether or not that's something that could be done? What would be involved in doing that, in placing a sprung structure on top of the existing pool?
There had been no work that I know of that was specific to that. There was an ongoing project, however, to upgrade the existing Centennial pool, the piping and so forth, the piping, the pump, the filtration and so on. And so there had been work done around the pool, but as far as I know, not specific to covering it with any structure.
When you say there had been work done around the pool, can you just give us a sense of what had been done?
It was in preparation for the Wellness Center project that never went forward, but there was some site works done, site grading essentially, and preparation. There was a contract let that was to a pool company that I want to say was maybe $40,000 or $50,000 to upgrade the pump and the filtration and replace the piping around the pool because it needed to be larger. And those changes were being made in order to bring the pool up to current health standards.
Do you know when that work was done?
It was like year before. It would either be 2011 or 2012.
Prior to council directing staff to look at or to pursue a project timeline and detailed estimates for enclosing the pool with a fabric building, would you have expected there to have been more work or investigation into the feasibility of that before this decision was made?
I think the further investigation would have been warranted more or mostly in light of the scope changes to what this concept was at this date, to what the final concept was, or to what the interim concept was by the time there was a contract, to the final contract, or to the final concept after everybody had their input and the pool was modified to suit the swim team, and the pool was modified, or the therapeutic pool was modified, and all of those changes were certainly warranted more detailed investigation. The idea of just putting an enclosure over the existing pool without changing the intent of the pool may not have resulted in the need for a whole lot more investigation.
I'm going to break some of that down. Starting with, and at this point in time, if the intent is to cover the pool with a sprung structure, basically put the sprung on top of it, I take it from your answer, you say there may not have needed to be much further investigation. Why not?
Because in its inception, it was just that, put a cover over the existing pool. Not significantly change the mechanical systems, not significantly change anything about the existing pool, but just to cover it over. But as the concept evolved, then that changed, and it became, I think there was a pool change room building would be taken down and rebuilt inside the enclosure. But in the initial inception, there wasn't discussion about redoing all the filtration system, all of the chemical systems, all the components of the pool that were already there and existing. At the end of the day, the only thing they really salvaged was the concrete tub. But at this point in time, that wasn't the concept, I guess. And again, as the concept further developed, the mechanical systems got more involved, the heat recovery systems got more involved, and all of that added up to perhaps the need to question the viability of covering that pool or building a new pool beside it, for instance.
You've been discussing...
Just before you go on, I just wanted to understand, there was always the idea that the change room, that would have to be taken down and done again. That was always part of the concept or part of the idea.
I remember in one of those early meetings that the question was asked, might have been by myself, what are you talking about here? Are you saying you're going to put a cover over the existing change room, or that get taken down and built new? And the answer was that gets taken down and built new.
So in essence, then, the idea of putting the membrane over the existing, just dropping it down over the existing structure was never really on the table, because you were always going to redo, at the very least, you were always going to redo the change facilities and the shower, I assume, that goes with that, and whatever else the swimmers need in order to prepare. Well, I guess if you're not swimming in a competition, but just in order to go swimming.
Yes, and that would be one of the things that came out of one of those early discussions, that intent. So yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I guess we've started out, like, at this point in time, the question was about, should there be further investigation into the pool? And even based on the idea of just putting new change rooms and that kind of facility inside the new structure is a lot different than making changes to the mechanical systems, the pumping systems, the ability for the pool to meet FINA regulations and so on.
In terms of the scope of work changes that you're describing that may have warranted further investigation, did the scope of work change prior to August 27th, 2012 in a capacity that you thought would have required further investigation?
My recollection is that all of those significant changes that resulted in changes to the design of what was the concept, they all happened after the contract was signed.
Sorry, but except for the fact that the change room was going to have to be changed.
Except for that fact that the pool building would be taken down and essentially a new pool building built inside.
Inside the frame. So someone considering whether dropping the frame on top of the existing structure was viable, there would have been more work that needed to be done around whether or not the new change room would fit satisfactorily, how it would fit and how it would change the design and or the structure or the improvements that you would have to make to the structure if something like that's going to happen, as opposed to just dropping it on top of what's there. Am I right about that or not?
The design of what would be put in place to replace the existing pool change rooms and that existing building that was there would have to be done. It would have to fit inside that proposed structure. The proposed structure might have to increase in size by a number of feet to facilitate that. But that's different than changing the intent of the pool and the intent of the use of the pool.
You're not changing that because you're not changing the pool at that stage.
At that stage, correct.
But you are changing the change rooms.
Looking at the direction that Council gave staff at the July 16th meeting, I'm going to start with the arena and then the pool. What was it your understanding that staff was tasked to do in terms of what were they going to report back on August 27th when it came to the pool? Sorry, the arena. Start with the arena.
I think the In the case of the arena, it would be a comparison of a traditional style bricks and mortar arena to a fabric structure may or may not be specifically a sprung fabric structure, but a fabric structure. And that could be phased into a double pad in either case.
When this resolution was passed on July 16th, was it your understanding that one of the construction types for the arena that was to be investigated was a fabric structure?
That would be the understanding that I had after this meeting, yes.
And how did you come to form that understanding that fabric would be one of the options?
Because of the conversations with Sprung, because of the concepts that they provided, and because of the general interest to pursue that as one of the options.
When you say general interest to pursue that as one of the options, what do you mean by that?
Interest, I guess, evidenced by the CAO and mayor and the deputy mayor through the series of meetings and discussions that had gone on.
So was it your understanding at this point in time that Mr. Houghton was interested in pursuing Sprung buildings?
As an option.
Do you know why he was interested in that?
No.
You ever ask him why? You know what the mayor or deputy mayor's interest was in pursuing Sprung buildings?
No.
Any reason why you didn't ask Mr. Houghton what his interest was in pursuing Sprung buildings?
No reason I didn't. I mean, myself, I could see the merits of the Sprung type of fabric building. Not that they're necessarily superior, but they had their own merits.
And what were the merits that you saw?
Largely the simplicity of construction and the insulating value that could be achieved in the basic structure. And we haven't talked about it yet, but the proclaimed LEED equivalency, LEED silver equivalency of the building.
At this point in time, did you have any sense of the LEED potential of a Sprung structure?
I think it was one of the items discussed by the Sprung representatives in the meetings that we'd had to that date.
And what do you recall they said about LEED and Sprung?
That the LEED, or the Sprung building, by its basic design, is a LEED equivalent building. Meaning that you could take that building and apply for your LEED certification and be granted it without any design changes to the building.
Was it your understanding that other steps would have to be taken in order to achieve a LEED certification, outside of the fact that the building did not require design changes?
Certainly the consulting work to prove it, and the additional commissioning work, again, to prove it. Because the lead organization, in order to grant the certification, needs to have all that documentation on the build.
Was it the case that you understood that, take the pool for instance, that if a sprung structure was placed on top of the pool, it would be LEED certified so long as the certification process was followed?
That was what we were told. That was my understanding at the time.
And that understanding came from?
Strong representatives.
At that point in time, had you had any experience with LEED buildings?
Only on the fringe, to do with the library building. The majority of that work to achieve the LEED certification on the library building was done in the design and during construction and commissioning. But after that point, I took over the building as the facility manager. And so there was additional reporting requirements for years after in order to ensure that the building was performing as it was intended.
Did your understanding change at any point in time about the notion that a sprung structure would be capable of being LEED certified so long as the commissioning process was followed?
It didn't change, no.
When you were told that the buildings would be LEED certified, did you verify that or check that with anyone outside of Sprung?
No. And they wouldn't, just to clarify, they wouldn't be LEED certified. They would be LEED equivalent.
Did you check with anyone whether or not to confirm that the Sprung buildings were LEED equivalent?
No.
Just help me with that, though. It doesn't, there's more, before you get to the LEED equivalency, there's a lot more that has to be done than simply purchasing, than simply the way the structure, the way the membrane is manufactured.
No, that was their claim. Which I suppose I don't know to be true or not true to this day, but their claim was that their building, by its basic design, would meet the requirements of a LEED Silver certification. So in the case of the library, which is a traditional structural steel building, bricks and mortar, flat roof. In order to take that building to not a LEED Silver certification level, but to a LEED Gold certification level, there had to be many, many, many components upgraded or added to that building in order to gain the points that would be required to meet that level of LEED certification. As opposed to the Sprung structure, which by its nature, the claim was that it was LEED capable of that LEED Silver certification without any modifications.
Okay. That was the representation.
Yes.
How was that communicated to you?
Verbally, and I think it may have been in some of their literature. And there was an energy study that they provided on one of their buildings. I can't remember specifically what it said, but there was a study provided that identified the superior insulation and particularly the airtightness of the facility that that added to the building's efficiency.
Just to confirm, other than the statements made by Sprung, either in person or in writing, did you do any further investigation into the LEED capabilities of Sprung buildings?
No.
Going back to the slide in front of us, began by asking you what you understood council direction, what staff had been directed to do with respect to the arena, and you said compare a fabric structure to a bricks and mortar structure. What did you understand staff to have been directed to do when it came to option 8 and covering the pool with the fabric building?
As far as what I would have known, the only option there in consideration would have been a sprung structure.
At that point in time, had you done any research into whether or not Sprung had competitors?
At that point in time, I can't say.
Did you understand that staff had been directed to consider other potential construction types for the pool? At least as a means of comparison to a fabric structure?
I didn't understand that, no.
So with that in mind, what did you understand staff was supposed to do when it came to reporting back on the fabric building?
A project timeline and estimates. For council's consideration.
At that point, did you have an understanding or consideration of how staff would go about determining the timeline and estimates, what steps they would take?
At that point in time, probably not. At that point in time, I don't believe that we were, don't believe the intention was to go out go out and get a detailed design and go through a competitive process. I think it was still in the investigative stage where we would do cost comparisons between similarly featured structures, for instance.
Can you just explain what you mean by similarly featured structures?
I guess I'm talking specifically about a traditional style B-inch building type arena versus a fabric structure. In the case of the arena, in the case of the pool, there was no comparison to be done that I can.
And I'm just trying to get a sense, because, at least as I understand, your understanding, there was no comparison to be done. Maybe I'll put it this way. After this resolution was passed, did you participate in any discussions on what staff was going to do to fulfill the direction to report back on a outdoor pool with a fabric building?
Specific to the outdoor pool?
Yes.
No, I don't recall any discussions.
Did you do anything after the July 16th meeting to look into the covering the outdoor pool with a fabric building?
I think at that point I had already provided whatever information I had on Heritage Park and the existing Centennial Pool and the change room facility and so on. So I don't think that I did anything further. At some point, we identified the features in a description of what would be in either an arena or the pool as a basis. I can't recall whether it was before or after this resolution. So specific to the pool again, at some point we made a list essentially defining what would be included in the pool, covering the pool.
And I believe we'll get to that in a moment. Other than compiling the list of features of the pool, did you have any other involvement in researching or further investigating covering the outdoor pool with a fabric building?
In terms of investigation, no.
Council directed staff to report back on not later than August 27th, 2012. Do you know how that date was selected?
I don't know.
Do you recall if you formed a view at the time whether that was sufficient amount of time to report back on what you'd been directed to report back on?
Certainly had a view on that. It was too short of a timeline, but that was the timeline.
Why, in your view, was it too short of a timeline?
Because of the amount of work that would have to go into satisfying those requirements and being able to put all the information together.
When you say that, are you talking about the work of comparing the construction types for the arena?
Probably, because that's where I could see the biggest amount of work.
Any other large amount of work that you were forecasting would be difficult to achieve by August 27th?
Not that I recall.
Did you share with anyone your view that this was not enough time to get this done?
Not that I recall.
Any reason why you wouldn't raise that?
Raising it wouldn't change it. That was the date that was provided, and so that was the date that we had to work to.
Why was it the case that you felt that if you raised it, it wouldn't change the date?
I guess, again, it wasn't my place to change the date or to request that the date would be changed.
Was in your position that you had, if you needed more time when council imposed a deadline, what was the process for asking more time?
The process would be go back to council and ask for more time, and that seldom happened.
Why did that not happen that often?
Because I think that staff's desire is to meet the expectations of council as they're given. It's seldom a discussion. It's seldom, or it's mostly one directional in terms of something like a timeline.
In this instance, did you feel you had any opportunity to express to council that the timeline they had set was tight, or you would benefit from more time?
No, I was not in communication with council. I was not presenting to council and didn't converse with council about it.
Who would converse with council about the timelines?
That would be at the department head or the CAO's level.
In this case, did you have any conversations with any department heads or CAOs or the CAO about this timeline?
Not that I recall.
Just before we go on any further, this motion, that's July the 16th?
Yes.
So what's involved with detailed estimates? What do you understand when you're told to go out and get detailed estimates of the cost of enclosing the outdoor pool with a fabric building?
Specific to the pool, and if there were other considerations other than a sprung building over the pool, then it might involve approaching Sprung plus the other suppliers with a design concept to say to essentially get a good budget estimate on what this would be worth. Not a competition at that point, but budget pricing. a little simpler there if there was only one manufacturer in consideration at that point. And those conversations had kind of already started in terms of what the components of the enclosure for the pool would be and what it would cost. So there would have to be a description of what would be included. I would think in response to that there would be a conceptual design, and there would be a budget estimate that would go along with it, that then the town could take and put appropriate contingencies on and say, this is what we think it'll cost.
Right. And at this stage, on July the 16th, the decision has been made to exclude all other kinds of coverings except the fabric building. All other kinds of buildings have been excluded, as I read that.
That's the way I read it.
So that would in your experience, would that not mean that there would have had to have been some serious consideration of the various types of structures that were available, and a decision made that the fabric building was preferable before you could get to this recommended option?
I would agree with that.
Do you need detailed plans to have detailed estimates?
Not at this point. Not.
Well, you've got to come back on August 20. Not you personally, but the staff have to come back on August 27th with detailed estimates.
A detailed estimate is not the result of a competitive bid, for instance.
Right.
In my mind, it's in traditional construction, it could be an engineer's estimate. So you go to the engineering consultant, and based on their experience and industry standards, they could come to you with a detailed estimate for a traditional style building. In the case of a fabric building, they're specialized, and the only people that would be able to provide the detailed estimate on a fabric building would be the fabric building manufacturer or somebody connected to them.
Were you under the impression that the only fabric building manufacturer was Sprung?
They were the only ones that had that robust design and that wouldn't take modifications for a traditional fabric style building to make it suitable. And they were the only one that was actively marketing not a fabric building, but a sports facility enclosed by a fabric building. So I could go to one of the agricultural style building suppliers and say, can you cover this pool? And they'd say, sure, but what you'd get is an agricultural style building over the pool. The difference being that Sprung's Sprung was marketing the whole facility.
But this doesn't say Sprung. It just says a fabric building.
Right.
So,
that's correct.
I mean, would you, in your experience, would you have expected then that there'd be various fabric building detailed estimates for various types of fabric buildings and detailed project timelines for the various fabric buildings that were out there, and then a decision would be made?
That kind of goes back to the earlier investigation into fabric buildings for over the outdoor rink. They wouldn't meet building code requirements or or an assembly type occupancy like a pool or an arena.
What do you mean by that?
Under the building code, an assembly type occupancy, and it provides examples like arena, pool, auditorium, and so on. They have specific requirements that need to be met. And in our earlier investigation, the agricultural style buildings that we looked at to cover the existing outdoor rink couldn't meet those building code criteria.
Those are agricultural style fabric buildings?
Yes.
Are there
And by that, I mean-
other kinds of fabric buildings that are not agricultural style?
Generally speaking, they'll have a steel structural frame, so like a truss system, with a membrane on the outside of the trusses. And that's it. In conversation with suppliers previously, my own determination was that they would put insulation under that membrane if you requested it, but it would be a similar insulation membrane as an older style pre-engineered building, meaning it would be 2 or 3 inches of fiberglass bat rolled over underneath the membrane. And that was their solution to provide insulation.
That's the agricultural style. Is that correct?
Yes. That was the information that I got from the agricultural style building suppliers.
Were there other types of fabric buildings that were not agricultural style?
Not that I'm aware of. They all fit that same design basis.
Okay.
And perhaps agricultural style isn't the right thing to call them, but it's that simplistic design, which is a steel truss and a membrane. And I was never aware of any that varied off of that simple design.
Picking up on that, after the July 16th meeting, did you do any research to determine whether or not there was another manufacturer of a fabric building that wasn't agricultural style but met the requirements you saw in Sprung?
My additional research, I think, was focused on whether there was anybody else that was marketing a membrane style structure or a fabric structure that was specifically intended to cover sports facilities.
And why did you have that focus?
Because I'd been through the other analysis that I just explained, that the other traditional style of fabric buildings would be very difficult, if even possible, to get to that place.
Did you look to see if anyone had a style of building like Sprung, but had used it for applications other than recreation facilities?
Couldn't find any other manufacturers of buildings like Sprung.
And what did you do to satisfy yourself that there wasn't other manufacturers of buildings like Sprung?
That was based on my own internet searches.
Appreciate it was a while ago. Can you give a sense of what was involved in your internet searches?
I guess searching on every word combination I could think of to try and come up.
Do you have a sense of how many searches you ran?
I think I was fairly focused on it for a while, so I probably tried different combinations and searched around for maybe half a day. Maybe not continuously, but as a sort of a focus.
Did you keep a record of your searches or your search results? Do you know if other staff members were doing searching into whether Sprung had competitors?
I don't know.
Did you ever ask Sprung if they had any competitors?
I don't know if I ever asked them that. But I think my sense was that their statement would be that they didn't.
Did you ever speak to any other people in any other municipalities who had recently built arenas or pools and ask them what they had looked into?
Not that I recall.
What was your understanding of how many arenas Sprung had constructed at that point in time?
There was perhaps 3 or 4 in Canada and another half dozen or so in the US, maybe.
You recall if you reached out to any of those users and asked them about their experience with Sprung or whether they had considered other options?
Not myself.
You know if anyone on staff did?
I don't know.
So we see after the after the July 16th, 2012 council meeting, you become involved with WGD in the work that they're carrying out, and you also become involved in the drafting of the staff report that's presented on August 27th, 2012. How did you get assigned to this project?
To the project overall?
To the work of working with WGD and then working on the staff report.
I don't believe that anybody said, this is your assignment and these are your tasks. I think because of me being invited to the early meetings with Sprung, it was sort of an assumption that I would carry on and do work towards not only early meetings with Sprung, but I guess at the same time I was I had become involved in the report from this Central Park Steering Committee, not directly, but in looking at the options and helping to figure out how that would play out in the whole Central Park scheme. And so based on all that, nobody assigned me to be involved. I just stayed involved.
Do you know why you were invited to the initial Sprung meetings?
I think because of my facility manager role, because I had because these were facilities being talked about and I had access to facility information on existing facilities and so on. And maybe because I was already involved in the outcome of the steering committee report to some extent.
Did anyone explain that to you, or is that something that you gleaned based on what you'd already been working on?
Yeah, nobody explained that at all.
Your Honor, I believe the union has suggested we shut down at this point of the day.
It's Friday, 9 o'clock for everybody.
Thursday, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, Thursday, 9 o'clock. Right.
All rise.
Hospital, I faced more rehab and counseling, but had no hope. A referral to a walk-in counseling clinic funded by the United Way made all the difference. In the sessions that followed, I discovered that childhood sexual assault was at the core of my struggles. I still have work to do, but I'm feeling happy and hopeful. I can't ever remember feeling like that. My name's Jeff, and donations to United Way Simcoe Muskoka helped change my life. Thank you.
Action on Rogers TV.
So one of the last issues I'd like to discuss with you two, now this has provided all of us with a spectacular ability to do 5 things at once. So with our phones, we can see dates and projections, and we can buy stock, and we can do almost anything off these things. Do you see any challenges or dangers in the future about the focus, because our arts, culture, and heritage is about people getting together in social aspects. And I sometimes worry about the phone diminishing the desire of younger folks wanting to get together because they can almost do everything from their phone. Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's the story of you're sitting there and you look over in the restaurant and there's a table full of kids all on their phones and they're talking to each other on the phone. I mean, that's, it really breaks down the interpersonal relationship.
Yes, and from a educator point of view, I see that all the time. It's almost like I'm putting a capital punishment forward by saying, take all your phones and put them on your desk and turn them off. You can almost hear the gasping going through the room. It's because they're so used to that. So I'm just a little bit concerned that the predominance of this screen and the screen time from 204 has gone like this, exponentially up. Screen time from TV, laptop, and has gone dramatically up. At the same time, the social problems of emotional aspects of that same group has also driven upwards the same way. So I'm just wondering if there's things in our lifetime that we've seen grow and be positive. Is there a worry that the cell phone might interact in a negative way with arts, culture, and heritage? Will people want to watch the phone instead of going to the live performance at the station to see jazz? Will they do their research here versus reading your magazine? Well, what impact is there, or we don't have a handle on it?
I think there is a huge impact, and I think that we have to differentiate direct communication, texting, emailing, from social media, and I think that they're very different. And I think that where the problem lies is in the preoccupation of social media. The amount of time that the gazillions of people who are on Facebook, who are literally using Facebook all day to try and track their friends or to track what's going on, to Twitter madness and to other ways that social media uses up time, because that's not direct communication with people.
I agree.
That's an intermediary. Whereas at least I'm probably in better touch with my kids who live in London, England, Bangkok, LA, and Toronto by email, by FaceTime. FaceTime's a great positive thing because it allows people who can't be together to actually see, almost, sense each other much better. But the social media, where they're using another device to interact like Facebook, to me, that is a real worry, and I can only hope that, as we've heard some people say, I'm off Facebook, I'm out of that, either for security reasons or because I don't want to live my life that way. I'm hoping that it'll be a fad. What will replace it, we don't know. But I think on the other side, texting, for instance, was big in Europe 10, 15 years ago. It only came here in the last 10 years, where people, and only more recently, where people are texting. I think that kind of quick, direct communication with people that you're going to be seeing by the end of the day is fine. My problem is social media per se.
I have a box of telephones that I've kept from my career, and it's a big box, and they go way back to the 80s, when those big, almost army-looking handsets with the big antennas that weighed about 15 pounds a piece, and you had to have a special
and the battery pack that was
so I had all those, and I take them and put them on the table to these new millennials, and I said, okay, let's guess the years of all this stuff. And they're just befounded to look at this stuff and go, I saw that on TV once. The big ones?
Yeah.
And the different little teeny phones, they went into a small phone aspect with a flip, and then they've gotten bigger again. So you can see the evolution of this communication device, and it's huge.
Yes.
Guys, it's been really great and interesting. I thank you so much for the information you've helped us with, and I'm sure we left a lot of crumbs that people can take by research aspect and go and find out about Frank's background or what Frank talked about this or Jeffrey's positions and things. The final question for you, Jeff, and I don't mean it to be a difficult one, but we haven't talked about your combination of taking editing and business together to do your current position. So it's an interesting relationship. I mean,
you mean the new general manager of the radio station?
It's very interesting. I mean, I became aware of that because I always listened to that station.
Right.
Because as I grew older, I would have different stations for different things I did in my life. So there was a country and western station when I was going to be doing something of one side, and then there was the classical music side that I discovered, and I said, now, I always listen to classical music on the discs and on the records, but I never listen to it as much as I do currently. And it's not a promotion for you. I'm just saying it's an interesting combination that you're an editor, but you also now are doing something, managing a radio station.
Well,
so the crossovers.
So one small point. I'm not an editor. I'm a publisher. Now, it's important to understand that difference. So a publisher has the responsibility for both the business as well as the spirit of the magazine. If you were doing a theatrical production, it would be the producer. So in a brand new show, the producer hires the director. He's kind of the business and the spirit of the venture, and so that's what I'm doing with the radio station. I'm playing the role of a producer. I am thinking through how could this radio station be better. Well, we've got 16 years of great content in On the Bay. What if we took all the historical inside back cover looking backs and asked Janet to rewrite them for radio? You write very differently for radio, and it has to be obviously much shorter. And so we've repurposed editorial excerpts from the magazine onto radio, and then sold them to sponsors who would sponsor looking back, sponsor history notes.
Great move.
And we've done that with maybe 5 or 6 things in the magazine, including Grassroots Heroes and other aspects where it's genuine editorial repurposed for radio and sold not as advertisements, but of sponsored editorial spots on the radio.
Part of the quality of life.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just it's actually quite a natural combination. We're both local media. We now broadcast. One little bragging point. We're the first local radio station to broadcast to all of Ontario.
Yes.
So we're right from Kingston to Hamilton. Bill Anderson on his 10 to 3 show is talking to everybody in Ontario.
Well, there's people around the world he's talking to because with the event of the computer,
that's true.
He was talking to somebody from Havana and somebody from Australia, and it's just interesting to hear. Oh, I'm calling in from. Oh, that's I'm listening to you, and I'm in Vienna. Wow. Thank you, Frank, very much for sharing your stuff with me today, and thank you for all the work you've done in this community to date. It's been a big step forward. And Jeff, same thing. You guys have brought in things to improve, and that's what it's all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media. This is Rogers TV, Collingwood.
It's so inspiring to know that there's people out there that are willing to help people who've gone the situation that I've gone through. Because of United Way, I'm able to stand in front of you today with a good job that I can actually make something of myself.
Growing up, I just felt this hatred for myself, and I stopped planning for the future because I didn't think I had one. Without United Way and the generosity of the whole organization, I don't even really know where I'd be.
This is Rogers TV, Collingwood.
I'm Stacey Doust. I work for the David Busby Centre. Here at the centre, we are starting to gear up for our winter season ahead. It was a busy one last year, so we are looking for volunteers to help with our group lodging program, formerly known as Barrie Out of the Cold. So if you're interested in helping to come help out with dinner, breakfast, even a social shift, we'd be happy to have you. You can reach us at volunteer@busbycentre.ca or at 705-739-6916. All help is appreciated, and we hope to see you soon.
Hey everybody, I'm Kevin Forget from Ontario Travel. We have some great stuff for you to check out. Let's start off with Culture Days happening September 27th through the 30th at various locations around Barrie. It's a chance to get a behind-the-scenes look at the arts through a variety of activities and programs. You can experience everything from live music to walking tours, arts and crafts, and so much more. There's also the Festival at Fort Willow in Springwater, September the 28th. Historical reenactors will bring to life the daily activities of British soldiers, camp followers, and Indigenous people living in Simcoe County in the early 19th century. Come and learn about traditional blacksmithing, candle making, and listen to the cannons roar. We also have the Barrie Sportsman and Outdoor Show at the Bradford Greenhouses Garden Gallery in Barrie, September 28th and 29th. From hunting to fishing, outdoor recreation, to a whole lot more, they have everything at the show. Come find out about new excursions and the latest in fishing tackle, plus more. Plus, Pumpkin Furno kicks off October the 3rd and runs every Thursday through Sunday until October the 30th at Discovery Harbor in Penetangwishee. You'll see thousands of the most amazing carved pumpkins on display.
What's up, Brewster? When's the Cold Waterfall Fair? It's Friday, the 27th of September, right through to the 29th of September. And you're going on Sunday, the 29th. Yes, we don't want to miss the rooster contest. There's lots of things that we're planning, new things. Our talent show is on Saturday. It's going to be really exciting, I think, this year. We haven't had it before. We have zucchini drag racing on Sunday. We have lots of kid activities on the Sunday in particular, and special pricing on Sundays. We have our demolition derby on the Friday night, truck and tractor pull on the Saturday night, and tons of activities in between with indoor vendors and indoor competitions. We have our livestock. We have horses, lots of things going on and lots of things planned. One thing that we have that's before the fair is our ambassador program. It's for ages 17 to 24. Young ladies or young men, we're looking for an ambassador for a fair. So if we're looking for someone that might want to stand up and represent the fair this year. Come out to the Cold Waterfall Fair, you're not going to regret it, and there's something for everybody there.
I saw a need in this foundation. They needed help in, obviously, dollars is a huge thing, but also foster families, food, everything that it takes to raising a dog to help anybody with any type of disabilities. So.
I went blind at the age of 17, and I knew almost immediately that I wanted a dog guide. Norma is my 4th dog, and I've been getting dogs from the Lions Foundation of Canada since 1994. And they get better every year, and my journey with them is so rewarding, and it gives me such independence, security, and peace of mind that this is why I keep wanting to give back and pay it forward and thank the Lions Foundation by organizing or help organize this walk.
We do our best to bring awareness to this foundation because a lot of people don't know about it. And the dogs are supplied free to anybody, so that's why fundraising is so important. Nobody knows about it, so I feel it's important. There's so many other things going on. It's a good foundation, and usually locally it stays here. There's a couple teams in Aurelia that we have sponsored. So that in itself is rewarding for us.
About 25 to 30,000 to train each dog, and that's why the walk is so important, because each dog takes that much. That's the care, that's the training, that's the vet bills, that's from the start of puppy to the day they graduate. It's about $25 to $30,000 to train these dogs per dog. The walk is on Sunday, September 29th at Couchiching Beach Park, Pavilion 1 in Aurelia. The registration begins at 10 a.m. The walk begins at 11 a.m. The walk is for all fitness levels, all ages, rain or shine, with or without a dog. They always say dogs are a man's best friend, but they're women's best friend too. She's definitely mine.
We found out through our partners in Simcoe and Muskoka that there was a really severe shortage of personal support workers. So we decided as one of our projects this year to do a series of events to increase awareness of the PSW career path and the jobs that are available and what's involved in the jobs. So we convened with some of our partners and said, okay, we want to have employers, educators, employment service providers, and academic upgrading providers. And we want to allow people in the different communities to come in and talk to everybody and see what's involved and find out about the career path. I think a lot of people just haven't considered personal support worker as a career path. But from the people that we've talked to, for the right type of person, it's a really rewarding career. It also is what we call a ladder or a path to other healthcare careers as well that maybe people don't know about. In Huntsville, we're having it at the Canada Summit Centre, upper viewing area at 20 Park Drive on Wednesday, September 11th. In Gravenhurst, we're having it at the Centennial Centre, Terry Fox Room, 101 Centennial Drive on Wednesday, September 18th. In Aurelia, we're at the Banquet Hall at St. Paul's Centre, 62 Peter Street North on Wednesday, September 25th. In Midland, we're at the Midland Golf Country Club dining room at 9536 Penetanguishene Road. That's on Wednesday, October 2nd. In Collingwood, we're at the Collingwood Public Library, Community Rooms B and C, 55 St. Marie Street on Wednesday, October 9th. In Barrie, We're at the Royal Canadian Legion, number 147, in their banquet hall on the second floor at 410 St. Vincent Street. And just a note on the Barrie location, the parking lot entrance is off Ferris Lane. That's on Wednesday, October 16th, and all of the events are from 5 to 8 p.m. There's no fee, it's absolutely free, and we have our website, www.pswsimcoemuskoka.com, and all the information is available there and a registration link as well.
Is a home care agency in the Barrie area that provides the full spectrum of care to individuals living at home independently, living in retirement, or long-term care. The first food drive that we had at these Airs on Cundles was a huge success. We were able to garner, I believe it was $1,700 in monetary donations and close to 2,000 pounds of food that were collected that day.
Almost 60% of our donations are received through third-party organizations. So organizations like churches and schools and businesses, and an organization like Comfort Keepers is a third-party organization that is raising food for the food bank that will allow us to not only feed families, but to also feed those seniors who are coming through the doors of the Barrie Food Bank.
Our seniors are the most vulnerable population that we have in our community, and we do have an obligation to provide as much support to them in our community.
What we're looking at is individuals who thought that their Canada Pension Plan and their old age security would help them to get through their senior years, are all of a sudden realizing, wow, I should have put more money away in my RSPs, I should have had other forms of income coming into my household so that I could be prepared when I hit that age of 65 or 70 or whatever it is. So they're running out of money. They're paying for their rent, they're paying for their utilities, but they don't have enough money for food at the end of the month.
We are asking local businesses, small businesses, to give us a call at our office. We are able to, with the help of the Barrie Food Bank, bring over a donation bin to have in your place of business, have your employees, have customers and clients bring non-perishable food items. We will also be providing a list of essentials that are mostly kept in our seniors' cabinets that are non-perishable food items, and we are asking for the public to come out and join us on October 5th for the food drive. You know, come in, speak to us about what we're doing in the community, and be involved in such a great event.
Students that are coming to Canada to study need a place to live, and we place them with host families. This is a great way for the students to get to know Canada and to adapt to the Canadian way of life.
Yeah, at first it was like a shock to see all different and speaking English all the day. But then it was like really great. She cooks so well. She has really good food. We all think the same, all the students. We are 3 students here, one from Panama, another one from Bahrain. So it's really different for each country, and so we really talk a lot how things are back home and how different it's from Canada. And they are so older, so they like tell me things that and share with me things that I don't do with my friends because they are the same age. So I also learn some things from them that I done in school and in other places.
He came in September and got very involved with tennis right off the bat. Not shy, really smart young fella. And he was going back in December. And he was hoping that his dad could convince his mom to come back and do another semester. So that I found out, I think it was maybe October, November, that he was going to be able to come back. So he went home for Christmas, got his skis, because he had joined the ski club at Eastview. And Then he joined another club, a Toronto club, ski club, and last Saturday, I take him up to Mount St. Louis every Saturday, and last Saturday he won a race, and they wanted him to be an instructor next year. So it's just been delightful to have him in my home.
All was different from my country, from Spain. A lot of things, like the school is so different actually. And here they have a lot of focus on sports, also you can play a lot of sports. And also the families are different, the food is so different. Like basically all is different, and you discover a lot of new things and new like way to live.
Our founder actually had a bed and breakfast in Toronto, and she was asked by an organization if she could host several students or a group of students, and of course she could, but it gave the idea that this was a need, and in fact it was. It's grown tremendously over the years to the point where we've had tens of thousands of students now. Well, they can just apply on our website, which is called whyihost.ca, and there's several things that we will look for. After you've filled out the application, you will get a call, and there will be an interviewer that will come to see you. We want to make sure that the home is appropriate for students. We're looking for a private bedroom for the student that has a bed and a desk so they can study. We want to make sure that the room has a window, for instance, for safety. So we meet the host, we find out what types of things they like to do, we find out about their pets, we find out how many rooms they have, when they're available, because not all hosts are available all year round. We also find out what types of students will they take. Some hosts just want female, some hosts just want male. Some hosts want high school students, some hosts just want college students. So we go through an interview process. Also, the host will need to get a police check. So we're looking for a vulnerable sector check, which means that you're safe with the vulnerable sector in our community. So after all that's done, and all your, we take pictures, all your profile pictures are there, then you become an active host.
Poly skiing, I really enjoyed that, and I also didn't have the chance to race back home because I need to drive a lot, and I can go all the weekends, and here it's much closer. So I really can ski all the weekends, and I joined a club, and I really had a lot of fun, met a lot of new people, and it's really great. So probably city skiing. We just have snow in the north of Spain. It's so weird to get snow like in the south of Spain. And for example, when I go to the mountains to skiing, it takes me 5 hours to get there. And there's we have snow, but not like in the countryside and in the town, in the mountains, and when snow also in the town, but it's not usually to have this amount of snow all the year. So that's so different as well.
So the ages range from 10 up to 75. So for sure, we do mostly high school and college students, but there is the odd occasion where we get somebody younger that needs to be placed. In Barrie, we work with Simcoe County District School Board and Georgian College. So right now we have 120 college students and 50 high school students. Now, last summer that was up to 250 college students.
I mean, they get tired of, thank you. You get tired of sandwiches, don't you?
Of course, I miss my family a lot, but it's like here I also feel like I have family. It's different, but also family, and it's really great that. And also I talk to them, but it's like I have all good experience here, and I have such a great time that I don't have time to miss them at all. I tell them that I miss them.
Nice to see the sun, but it's still a cool wind, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Not only are they students, but they're friends. And I treat them like they were my own sons. And you know, with Jamie, he's my second student that I've had with the high schools. And my first student was from Brazil, and he was into soccer and skiing. Jamie's into tennis and skiing, and I just love it. I love the youth. I think one of the real enjoyments, they bring the world to me, and I see the world through their eyes. And I get to know their families. Many of them, I talk to their families on Skype, and that's thrilling.
I would love to stay here in Canada, but I don't think I'm gonna have a chance because I need to finish grade 11 and grade 12 back home. But I'm sure that I'll try to come back someday, maybe to work or to study in the college or something. I don't know yet, but I'd love to do that, definitely, yeah.
I'm Bill. I'm going to be your pilot today on the Cornell, built in 1943. Pilots went through the Tiger Moth and then on to these, and then the next thing they were flying something like a Spitfire and going and fighting. So this was a trainer. They would get a few hours in this before they went off to war. It's a very forgiving airplane, but a very nice airplane to fly and have fun in. This is how we fly. This is the stick. Pull it back, we go up. Push it forward, we go down, and turning left or right. And I went and worked with a company called Ward Air International, and they were bought out by Canadian Airlines and taken over by Air Canada. So I still fly for Air Canada on a beautiful, brand new Boeing 787 Dreamliner. So, but I come here to fly these airplanes. This is my fun time, so we get to go. I get to take passengers up and have fun. Differences. This one I can definitely play around in and have a little more fun. 300 passengers don't like me doing too many turns and that kind of stuff. We have continuous maintenance on it. We have checks that we do every 25 hours or every 50 hours or as need be. They're completely restored. This airplane was restored probably 7 or 8 years ago. And the continuing maintenance so they can pretty well keep on going. We have a website, Edenville Classics. You can go on there. There's a phone number there, email address. You can book a trip, and we sell sponsorships and memberships. The memberships are entitled you to approximately either a 20-minute ride or a 40-minute ride. You can book those rides, and we'll go up, tour around the countryside, look at all the different little sites. It's very nice to fly along Wasaga Beach, Blue Mountain, fly over Blue Mountain Resort, and fly around and just look at the countryside.
It's called Jampa Ling Kadampa Buddhist Center. We're a tradition of Buddhism. There are many traditions of Buddhism. We're part of what's known as the new Kadampa tradition of Buddhism. We've had a center in Barrie for about 5 or 6 years. We offer classes, basically. We offer an opportunity for people to come to learn about Buddhist teachings at whatever level they're interested in. And it certainly doesn't have to be only those interested in Buddhism, but the techniques that Buddha taught, both the meditation techniques, but also the ability to more deeply understand our mind and cultivate the wisdom that we're all capable of. These are techniques, doesn't matter who you are, that just help you in your relationships, in your daily life, lead a more peaceful, happy, and finally meaningful life. And so that's what we offer, and again, at many different levels, and people come and go as they like. They're not asked to take on board everything they hear. They're just asked to, if you find something that you think would be helpful for you, that resonates with you, may it bring benefit. And that's basically what we do. Again, on our website, you'll see a whole, like a calendar and descriptions of the various classes. That we have classes for children and adults.
We are a not-for-profit organization that provides instruction in a lot of different programs, as well as some community service programs for the community. A lot of the first aid programs that we offer, we are the gold standard, so we are WSIB regulated. All of our courses are under the standards associated with the Ontario government. We make sure that we meet the highest standards possible.
Excellent. So now you are officially St. John Ambulance babysitters. So from this point forward, we are going to be doing that throughout the rest of the day, okay?
So our classes start with everything from the beginning of life. So new parent workshops are a fairly new addition to our programs. It's a 3.5-hour program for brand new parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whoever you got that wants to be helping take care of a baby. So it covers everything from choking to care of a newborn infant and any of the first aid scenarios that you may run into. From there, we move into our home alone programs for kids who are just about ready to start to stay home alone. As we know, there's no actual perfect age where a child can stay home alone. That's completely up to the parents. Usually it's not recommended until they're about 10, but some parents are wanting to know if they can, can their child stay home alone at 9, at 12, at 11, how does it work? So this gives them a little bit more skills, a little bit more confidence when they're going to be staying home alone. The babysitter program adds on to that by saying, not only can I stay home alone, now I can take care of other kids. So I can take care of siblings, I can take care of cousins, neighbors. So we're adding to this. We're giving them more leadership and more confidence skills as they go along. The car seat program is a not-for-profit portion of our program. We do this free of charge to any family member who has a brand new baby. Maybe they're switching from rear-facing to forward-facing. Maybe they're going booster. Maybe they are switching cars and what fit in one car doesn't seem to be fitting properly in the other car. We cover it all. We go through our training skills as rigidly as we teach our programs. We go through it every 3 years. I personally am a member of the car seat safety team, and this year we've done approximately 150. We're heading into 160, 70. We usually hit about 300 cars a year of people who are bringing them in, and that includes, families with multiple children and where should I have which child should be sitting where, and all of the questions they may have. And this is all done free of charge by appointment. All they have to do is call St. John Ambulance and we'll arrange the time frames with them. We do car seats here. We also do them at Bayfield Ford Lincoln. So they have partnered up with us and we are able to use their bay in the cold and the heat and anything that's coming up. So this winter we look forward to using this space again to keep families warm, because sometimes, the babies are here by the time they get to us. As a not-for-profit organization, we are 100% funded by the programs, the fundraising opportunities that we do in the community. So everything from the programs that we offer to donations that we get to events that we provide, to people coming along and making donations, whether it's product, whether it's time, whether it's skills, whether it's money. We have a lot of different not-for-profit things that we do throughout the community, including our medical first responder program, our therapy dogs, and a lot of the organizations will make a donation. The largest funding comes from the programs that we run. So from every program that we do, we have a lot of first aid. There's a portion of that goes towards the programs itself. And then there's the sales of products and our AEDs, our skills. This year we just added a new tick kit. So tick removals this year has been really bad for ticks. We don't foresee that changing in the near future. So we just added a new tick kit last week to our sales opportunities, and it's been selling very well. St. John Ambulance has an online program through St. John Ambulance, our website. You can call the office anytime, Monday through Friday. Our phone number here is 705-726-0991. You can sign up for programs, you can get more information, everything's available online. We have a Facebook page. You can connect with us in so many different ways. Let us know if you have a skill that you've used. So you've taken one of our classes and you actually want to come back to us and say, I did first aid, I saved a life, I did something amazing. We want you to connect with us. We're like the best kept secret of in town, because people don't always know that, I've taken my course. Now, what do I do if something great happens and I want to share that?
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media. This is Rogers TV, Collingwood.
For 25 years, you've been helping to make our roads safer by doing the right thing. You've been the designated driver, you've stayed over, called home, you've called a cab or a friend, and planned ahead. Let's keep doing the right thing. Support sober driving by getting yourself and your friends home safely.
Do the right thing.
Visit ArriveAlive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive. Drive sober.
This is Rogers TV, Collingwood.
What's up? Who's hot? Where's the latest action spot? Hints and tips, did you know? Milestones and local heroes. Sports, shorts, event reports, news you'll use of every sort. Celebrations and on location.
Plugged In, the TV show with what you want to know, what you need to know, and what you'd like to know about what's going on in your town this week.
Get plugged into your life, plug into here and now.
Get plugged in on your local cable station.
Local, live, and interactive. This is Rogers Television.
Hello and welcome to the Friday edition of Plugged In on Rogers Television. I'm your host, Valerie Cruz. On tonight's show, the Great Northern Exhibition starts today. Plugged In was there to visit